There is a specific kind of silence that happens right before your entire world shatters into pieces. Standing in the crowded departure line at the airport, watching a train detection dog sprint past a dozen passengers to lock onto a specific piece of luggage, I did not panic. I simply adjusted my coat, took another sip of my warm drink, and watched my husband realize that his bulletproof plan was about to ruin his own life instead of mine. My name is Julia Vance, and at 34 years old, my husband spent months assuming I was far too oblivious to notice the subtle shift in our marriage. Trevor had always been ambitious, serving as the senior director of financial operations at a prominent medical distribution firm. Over the past year, he slowly grew distant, cold, and calculated, constantly claiming that demanding work projects were keeping him late at the office. But numbers never lie, and as a forensic risk investigator, analyzing patterns and tracing hidden assets is literally what I do for a living. When I noticed small discrepancies in our personal accounts, I stopped asking questions and started digging. What I uncovered in the dark of our guest bedroom was far worse than a failing marriage. Trevor was actively embezzling funds from his company through a complex web of fictitious vendors, accumulating over $8 million in untraceable accounts. To make matters worse, he was using that money to fund an extravagant secret life with his administrative assistant, a 27-year-old named Chloe. She was even traveling on our flight under the absurd pretense of an urgent business transfer in Asia. Trevor truly believed he was the smartest man in the room, but he made the fatal mistake of underestimating my professional skill set. The true monstrosity of his scheme revealed itself 2 nights before our scheduled trip to South America. I feigned sleep while Trevor crept into the walk-in closet, retrieved a dense package sealed in heavy black tape, and carefully sliced open the internal framework of my rolling suitcase. He slid the contraband deep into the lining, intending to ensure I would be arrested by foreign authorities the moment we landed. With me trapped in an overseas prison, he could file for divorce, claim full control over our estate, collect on a heavy policy, and disappear forever alongside Chloe without raising suspicion. He spent the next 2 days walking around our home with a cruel sense of satisfaction, unaware that I had already extracted his trap while he slept. Inside that heavy package, concealed within the illicit substance, was a small encrypted memory card containing the actual financial ledgers, digital wallet passphrase, and forged digital messages designed to frame me. I cloned every single file onto a secure external server, perfectly repackaged the evidence, and waited for the right opportunity. Shortly before we left for the airport terminal, I quietly transferred the hidden package from my luggage into Chloe's unattended designer bag. Now, as the security screening belt ground to a sudden halt, the atmosphere in the terminal shifted from routine travel to pure panic. Alarm lights flashed red across the primary checkpoint while 3 heavily armed federal officers moved into position around the belt. Chloe shrieked in absolute disbelief as agents pulled her expensive bag from the scanner, ordering everyone to remain completely motionless. Trevor stood completely frozen beside me, his face draining of all color as he stared at the screen, unable to comprehend why my bag had passed through without a single warning light. The lead supervisor sliced through the reinforced bottom lining of Chloe's bag and extracted the thick rectangular brick wrapped in dark tape. Chloe immediately began screaming at the officers, insisting she had no knowledge of the package and demanding that Trevor explain the situation to the authorities. But Trevor had completely lost his composure, looking around the terminal like a trapped animal as the full reality of his failure finally set in. I stood just a few paces away, completely calm, holding my cup as the authority officers moved in to take control of the scene. A tall officer stepped forward to handle the confrontation, and Trevor nearly collapsed when he recognized him. It was my brother-in-law, dynamic federal Captain Brandon, who knew exactly what kind of man Trevor really was behind his expensive business suits. Brandon looked down at the package, then turned his focus directly onto the panicking couple, asking who owned the luggage. Chloe pointed frantically at Trevor, screaming that he had packed her bags and purchased her ticket, prompting Trevor to yell out in desperation that the parcel was supposed to be inside my suitcase instead. That single terrified outburst silenced the entire security checkpoint, serving as an absolute confession of intent in front of dozens of witnesses and recording devices. Federal agents immediately forced Trevor to the ground, securing his wrists in heavy steel handcuffs while Chloe continued to weep against the concrete wall. They were escorted away through the private exit doors for formal interrogation, leaving behind a sea of shocked travelers. I did not raise my voice, nor did I shed a single tear, knowing that every piece of corporate documentation was already sitting on the desks of federal prosecutors. Later that afternoon, I met with investigators outside the precinct room where Trevor sat completely broken, facing decades of federal prison time for narcotics conspiracy, wire fraud, and grand theft. He thought he could break my spirit by convincing me I was losing my mind, using subtle psychological manipulation to hide his own greed. But real power does not come from loud arguments or dramatic confrontations. True strength comes from staying composed, gathering undeniable truth, and allowing a person who built a trap for you to walk directly into it themselves.